Hey guys, we are back. It is Monday. 5 more days of stay-at-home work this week. So kind of want to get caught up on things. Just a couple of housekeeping things I want to talk about. One of the things that I did notice last week, and I really didn't want to go in and change lessons that had already been put up. And to be honest, I was wondering how long it would take for you guys to figure this out, and it took about 3 weeks. And so what I will no longer be doing is the questions that you have to do for Google Upload the following day. I will not be going over those on our YouTube Team Talk. And the reason being is that I had at least one person who went ahead and when I assigned the questions, they watched the next day's video and they just copied down the answers that I gave. Now, I'm not dumb, people. And so, I mean, if you're going to cheat, at least be a little more sly about it. Change the wording up some. Figure out a way to cover your tracks. I'm not saying that you should ever cheat, but I'm saying if you're going to, you're going to. But think about it because you almost always get caught. So you got caught. So now what we're going to do is I will only go over the journal questions that were not assigned to Google Classroom. And one of the reasons I don't feel bad about doing it that way is I almost always give you feedback on your Google Classroom questions. So before the test, you'll have all the feedback that you need on those to make sure that you've got correct answers in case those spiral back around, because you know sometimes they do. Another housekeeping thing that I want to talk about is that I had a 5th grade group last week that ended up with 6 videos, and it was a little confusing. If I get a phone call in the middle of a video, it automatically stops the video and then I gotta restart it. If I am like halfway through a lesson, I am not gonna start over and redo the whole lesson. I'm just pushing the button again and picking up right where I stopped. So if for some reason you have some kind of sketchy looking video or you're like, what? She didn't assign anything? That's why. Okay, I'm having to pick up right where I left off. So, that being said, we want to take a look at our end in mind. And our end in mind for this week is, I will be able to identify aspects of the characters through their thoughts, words, and actions. And it doesn't say character. That's one of the things I want you to really focus on. I'm doing holes with 5th grade, and their end in mind is identifying qualities of the main character. Yours is giving us the plural version and saying characters, okay? Aspects of the characters. So it doesn't have to be a main character. It can be any person in our story at this point. And so let's think about when I stopped reading on Friday, I had read a piece about Mama and Papa. And that reading had to do with a gentleman that their dad brought home from the railroad with him, Mr. Morrison. And I was able to identify a character or about Mama and Papa based on their treatment of Mr. Morrison. And what I came up with was that they were generous. That they were generous to open up their home, to open up feeding him, generous with just companionship. And so there was pieces in our reading that just really supported that. And so when we think about aspects of characters, what can we figure out about that person? And I looked at Mama and Papa's actions in that one to come up with that generous type of person. Now, I want us to go ahead and take our Team Talk out because remember on Friday, I kind of shortened our lesson. I said that was our Friday lesson. We were going to pretend that we had you know, maybe a assembly program and we had a shortened day. So we're going to pick up and we're going to break those questions down, and I'm going to read those. And I'm wanting you to circle and underline what stands out to you as important in our questions. I have describe law enforcement, and law enforcement is the police. So you might want to do that little V above law enforcement and write police. So I want you to describe the police in Mississippi, and that's where our story is taking place. That's our setting. And explain whether it is a dependable force. Number 2, why does Papa ban his children from going to the Wallace's store? Why does he ban them? Turning the page. Number 3, how does the author show that Big Ma, that's the grandmother, so you might want to do that little V again or a line and write grandma or mama. How does the author show that the mama is an optimist or someone who looks on the bright side of things? How does the author show that? And number 4, which of the following will most likely happen next? So you're making a prediction, is what you're doing. And then it says, give evidence from the story to support your prediction. That is a 30-point question on a test. So you want to make sure that your explanation is a really good one, okay? So it's worth 30 points. Let me clean my glasses. I just went and took a little walk, and I think I picked some pollen or something up on them. Now I can see. All right, so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take your book and open it to page 39. And I want to make sure where I stopped. Yep, that's good. So on your Team Talk, I want you to write pages 39 through 46. That's where you're going to find your evidence for this day's reading. Because remember, I told you I was going to try to make sure to do that. My hair is killing me, people. I need a haircut. I need a beautician. All right, is everybody ready? All right, here we go. At church the next morning, Miss Silas Lanier leaned across me and whispered to Big Ma, John Henry Berry died last night. When the announcement was made to the congregation, the deacons prayed for the soul of John Henry Berry and the recovery of his brother Beacon and his uncle, Mr. Samuel Berry. But after church, when some of the members stopped by the house to visit, angry, hopeless words were spoken. The way I hears it, said Mr. Lanier, they've been after John Henry ever since he come back from the war and settled on his daddy's place up by Smellins Creek. Had a nice little place up there too and was doing pretty well. Left a wife and 6 children. Big Ma shook her head. Just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, the boys and I sat at our study table pretending not to listen, but listening still. Henrietta Toggins, said Miss Lanier. You know Claire Davis's sister that lives up there in Strawberry? Well, she's kin to the Berries, and she was with John Henry and Beacon when the trouble got started. They was going to drop her off at home. You know, John Henry had him one of them old Model T pickups. But they needed some gas, so they stopped by that filling station up there in Strawberry. And they was a-waiting there for they gas when some white man came up and messing with them. Been drinking, you know. And Henrietta heard him say, that's the end, Sally Ann said, was a-flirting with her. And when she heard that, she said to John Henry, let's get on out of here. And he wanted to wait for the gas, but she made him and Beacon get in that car. And them men just watched them drive off and didn't mess with them right then. Well, John Henry, he took her on home and then headed back for his own place. But evidently, them men caught up with him and Beacon again and starts a running, ramming the back of their car. At least, that's what Beacon and John Henry told their aunt and uncle when they seed 'em. John Henry knowed he was running out of gas, and he was afraid he couldn't make it to his own place, so he stopped at his uncle's. But them men dragged him and Beacon both out of the house. When old man Barry tried to stop it, they lit him afire with them boys. "It's sure a shame, all right," said TJ's father, a frail, sickly man with a hacking cough. "They's folks getting so bad in here. Heard tell they lynched a boy a few days ago at Croston." "And ain't a thing gonna be done about it," said Mr. Lanyard. "That's what's so terrible. When Henrietta went to the sheriff and told him what she'd seen, he called her a liar and sent her on home. Now I hear tales that some of them men that done it been round bragging about it, saying they'd do it again if some old uppity inn get out of line." Miss Avery Tisk, Lord have mercy. Papa sat very quietly while the Lanyards and the Averys talked, studying them with serious eyes. And finally, he took his pipe from his mouth and made a statement that seemed to the boys and me to be totally disconnected with the conversation. "In this family, we don't shop at the Wallace's store." Well, the room became silent. The boys and I stared at the adults, wondering why. The Lanyards and the Averys looked uneasily about them, and when the silence was broken, the subject had changed to the sermon of the day. After the Lanyards and the Averys had left, Papa called us to him. "Your mama tells me that a lot of the older children been going up to that Wallace store after school to dance and buy their bootleg liquor and smoke cigarettes. Now, she said she's already told you all this, but I'm going to tell you again, so listen good. We don't want y'all going to that place. Children going there are going to get themselves in a whole lot of trouble one day. There's drinking up there, and I don't like it. And I don't like them Wallaces either. If I ever find out you all been up there for any reason, I'm going to wear y'all out. Y'all hear me?" "Yes, sir, Papa," piped Christopher John readily. "I ain't never going up there." And the rest of us agreed. Papa always meant what he said, and he swung a mean switch. Chapter 3. Well, by the end of the October, the rain had come, falling heavily upon the 6-inch layers of dust which had had its own way for more than 2 months. At first, the rain had merely splotched the dust, which seemed to be rejoicing in its own resilience and laughing at the heavy drops thudding against it. But eventually, the dust was forced to surrender to the mastery of the rain, and it churned into a fine red mud that oozed between our toes and slopped against our ankles as we marched miserably to and from school. Well, to shield us from the rain, Mama issued us dried calf skins, which we hung over our heads and shoulders like stiff cloaks. We were not very fond of the skins, and for one, they were wet. They emitted a musty odor which seeped in our clothing and clung to our skins. We preferred to do without them. Unfortunately, Mama cared very little about what we preferred. Well, since we usually left for school after Mama, we solved this problem by dutifully cloaking ourselves with the skins before leaving home. As soon as we were beyond Big Ma's eagle eyes, we threw off the cloaks and depended upon the overhanging limbs of the forest trees to keep us dry. Once at school, we donned the cloaks again and marched into our respective classrooms properly attired. If we had been faced only with the prospect of the rain soaking through our clothing each morning and evening, we could have more easily endured the journey between home and school. But as it was, we also had to worry about the Jefferson Davis school bus, zooming from behind and splashing us with the murky waters of the road. Knowing that the bus driver liked to entertain his passengers by sending us slipping along the road to the almost inaccessible forest banks washed to a smooth baldness by the constant rains, We continuously looked over our shoulders when we were between the two crossroads so that we could reach the bank before the bus was upon us. But sometimes the rain pounded so heavily that it was all we could do to stay upright, and we did not look back as often nor listen as carefully as we should. We consequently found ourselves comical objects to cruel eyes that gave no thought to our misery. No one was more angered by this humiliation than Little Man. Although he had asked Mama after the first day of school why Jefferson Davis had 2 buses and Great Faith had none, he had never been totally satisfied by her answer. She had explained to him, as she had explained to Christopher John the year before, and to me 2 years before that the county did not provide buses for its black students. In fact, she said, the county provided very little, and much of the money which supported the black schools came from the black churches. Great Faith Church just could not afford a bus, so therefore we had to walk. This information cut deeply into Little Man's brain, and each day when he found his clean clothes splashed red by the school bus, he became more and more embittered until finally one day he stomped angrily into the kitchen and exploded. "They done it again, Big Ma. Just look at my clothes." Well, Big Ma clucked her tongue as she surveyed us. "Well, go on and get out of them, honey, and wash them out. All of y'all, get out of them clothes and dry yourselves," she said, turning back to the huge iron-bellied stove to stir her stew. "Big Ma, it ain't fair," wailed Little Man. "It just ain't fair." Well, Stacy and Christopher John left to change into their work clothes, but Little Man sat on the side bench looking totally dejected as he gazed at his pale blue pants crusted with mud from the knees down. Although each night Big Ma prepared a pot of hot soapy water for him to wash out his clothing, each day he arrived home looking as if his pants had not been washed in more than a month. Well, Big Ma was not one for coddling any of us, but now she turned from the stove and, wiping her hands on her long white apron, sat down on the bench and put her arm around Little Man. "Now look here, baby. It ain't the end of the world. Lord, child, don't you know one day the sun will shine again and you won't get muddy no more?" "But Big Ma," Little Man protested, "even that old bus driver would slow down, I wouldn't get muddy." Then he frowned deeply and added, "Or even we had a bus like theirs." "Well, he don't and you don't," Big Ma said, getting up. "So ain't no use fretting about it. One day you'll have a plenty of clothes and maybe even a car of your own to ride around in. So don't you pay no mind to them ignorant white folks. You just keep on studying and get yourself a good education, and you'll be all right. Now go on and wash out your clothes and hang them by the fire so I can iron them before I go to bed." Turning, she spied me. "Cassie, what you want, girl? Go change into your pants and hurry on back here so you can help me get this supper on the table before your mama get home." Well, that night, when I was snug in the deep feathery bed beside Big Ma, and the tat-tat-tat of the rain against the tin roof changed to a deafening roar that sounded as if thousands of giant rocks were being hurled against the earth. Well, by morning, the heavy rain had become a drizzle, but the earth was badly sodden from the night's downpour. Huge rivers of muddy water flowed in the deep gullies, and wide lakes shimmered on the roads. As we set out for school, the whiteness of the sun attempted to penetrate the storm clouds. But by the time we had turned north toward the second crossing, it had given up, slinking meekly behind the black-winged clouds. Well, soon the thunder rolled across the sky, and the rain fell like hail upon our bent heads. "Aw, shoot! I sure am getting tired of this mess," complained TJ. But no one else said a word. We were listening for the bus. Let me check and make sure I'm not reading too far, guys. Okay, I'm good. Although we had left home earlier than usual to cover the northern road before the bus came, we were not overly confident that we would miss it, for we had tried this strategy before. Sometimes it worked, most times it didn't. It was as if the bus were a living thing, plaguing and defeating us at every turn. We could not outwit it. We plodded along, feeling the cold mud against our feet, walking faster and faster to reach the crossroads. Then Christopher John stopped. "Hey, y'all, I think I hear it," he warned. We looked around but saw nothing. "Ain't nothing yet," I said. We walked on. "Wait a minute," said Christopher John, stopping a second time. "There it is again." That's where we stopped today. I want you to look at your questions and I want you to think about evidence. And very quickly, and I do mean quickly, guys, I want you to jot down where do you think your evidence would be for questions 1 through 4. And as you're doing that, I'm going to do the same. And remember, I gave you the page numbers for evidence to look for it, and that would be 39 through 46. Because I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I'm going to give you about another minute. All right, so you're going to do questions 1 through 4 in your journal today because they are all very important. And I want you to pay close attention to number 4, where it wants you to give evidence to support your prediction, okay? All right, 1 through 4 in your journals, and I'll see you back here in just a few minutes, guys. Bye.